Hey guys, how's it going? Bit of a different video for me today, diving into a breakdown of who Larian Studios are, their journey from a small Belgian dev to the powerhouse that's unleashed Baldur's Gate 3 on the world and shaken the gaming industry to its core, and, most importantly, why they chose to become a self-published entity, going against the path that many developers turn to. Now for context, like many others, Larian Studios was completely unknown to me, until the release of Divinity Original Sin back in 2014. I'm not throwing on my hipster cap and pretending I followed them from the start, but this game sold me on the vision of this studio. DOS 1 was a turn-based RPG. If you've been following Baldur's Gate, and of course you have if you're watching this video, it was similar in nature but had its own flavour that set it apart. When I ran into DOS 1, scrolling through Steam one day, I was captivated by it. It felt fresh, the combat, the world, the storytelling was great in standard and in scope. This game was crowdfunded and was the studio's fastest selling game and is arguably what set them on their path to BG3 and today's success. But let's dive back slightly further. Larian was founded by the game's current creative director, Sven Vincke. Hope I pronounced that right, I apologise if I get it wrong. In 1996. The company had a hand in developing a number of games and some educational content before branching out and becoming a self-published entity with the release of Divinity Dragon Commander in 2013. A spin-off of the Divinity series which spans way back to 2002 when they released Divine Divinity and Beyond Divinity in 2004. It was the release of Divinity Dragon Commander and the crowdfunding of DOS 1 that I really want to focus on because it was in 2012 that Larian became self-published. Now, if you're not up to speed on what that means being self-published, many developers in the games industry look to publishers to assist with funding and many other aspects of the business like marketing, distribution, and so on. But with partnership comes with compromise and deals in terms of development, and of course removes some control and freedoms of implementation from the developers themselves. In a 2015 interview, Sven comments on their 2004 release being reviewed poorly, having been released early, and that they inevitably needed to continue cutting features they wanted to maintain in their RPGs. In a different interview from 2019, Sven reflects on signing with the German publisher CDV, who gave their 2002 game the name Divine Divinity, thinking they were joking before being told that alliteration sells. He spoke about the good times. They had funding and a publisher that believed in them, or so he thought. The team were getting paid, debts weren't a problem. He reflects that as they were traveling along one day, a producer appeared to talk about cancelling the game. He recalls they were far from ready, and he wrote them a letter explaining why releasing early was a bad idea. I gather from the context of the article linked in the description, by the way, release likely looked favourable to straight out cancellation. Sven told them it needed 6 more months, but then found they released the game, even being informed while he was on a press tour. He spoke about having a 30-man team dropping down to 3 people. His days descended into fixing save games and it was horrible. In the aftermath, they were able to survive, taking contracts here and there and creating quite a successful kids kind of hybrid game TV show that aired in Belgium and then was sold to the BBC. They were able to bring the team back up to 10, 11 people and start their work on Divine Divinity, the second in the sequel, and clearly sticking with the name previously chosen for them. He speaks about, again, looking at publishing deals and hating it. He spoke about being naive at the time, and eventually finding a publisher who supported them in their idea of a game involving a dragon that could fly anywhere and land anywhere. Let's quickly remember that in 2007, that would have been a pretty lofty feat. But then the financial crisis of 2008. The publisher they thought had their back suddenly needed to make money fast. And what do publishers do in those situations? They rush projects. We see it all too often now, and they released the game too early. It wasn't ready and reviews blasted them for it. So where do they go from here? Let's recap. They've attempted 2 RPGs, clearly the passion of the studio and what Sven really wants to work towards. But in both instances, the publisher has come in before the game has been ready for release and pushed them towards the end. They've been forced to release a game that they're not happy with, to reception that blasts them for it. And I think it's important to remember that nobody really pays attention to who it is that makes that decision. When a game releases, the studios get blasted. Nobody takes a look at the publisher. Nobody really knows that, hey, who made this decision here? And that brings us to the next decision and what was key in creating what Larian Studios is today. In a 2012 article, when they became self-published, Sven comments that they had the opportunity and grasped it, and that since their release of the first Divinity in 2002, they'd been trying to gain more control over their games, and that this was a major focus for him and the studio moving forward. Now, I don't want to criticize small developers who look to publishers for help. To be fair, Larian needed the support of the gaming community through their crowdfunding of DOS 1 to get that game into the hands of consumers, and this is the opportunity he's referencing. Crowdfunding before this time was relatively underutilized and unknown, and without that support, they would have needed a publisher to achieve anything close to DOS 1. Hell, in the 2015 interview with PC Gamer, Sven admits that the company delayed payments on taxes to spend more on development and voice acting. Taxes! You don't mess with the... Well, I mean, in Australia it's the ATO, but you don't mess with the IRS. They were aiming to spend 3 million euros after starting with about 1.5, and by the end had spent 4.5 million on development. Again, that's euros. I'll put up a conversion for you on the screen here in terms of Australian and US dollars. This was seriously a make or break moment for them. They'd rebelled against the publishing model, turned to the wider community alongside their own wallets and stability to achieve their vision. Larian's early years saw some challenges with publishers, with one of their first engagements ultimately leading to a game, The Lady, the Mage and the Knight, stalling and becoming eventually cancelled due to financial difficulties. And as previously mentioned, challenges within the Divinity series due to limitations from their engagement with third parties, forcing them to release early and release ahead of schedule, leading to things they didn't want to cut being cut. Reading these articles, some of which I've referenced to and will put in the description, it paints a clear picture of a man, Sven, and his studio wanting to achieve not necessarily greatness, but achieve a solidified vision without having to cut corners and release under the constraints of pressure from outside influence. This was no doubt a risk, but can you blame them? They'd attempted the norm, they linked in with third parties in an effort to create their visions and found themselves wanting. They'd tried this process and it led them to a lackluster release. And from what we see today, a group of developers in love with their craft, can you imagine how that must have felt watching their game land without much impact? It takes an incredible amount of respect for the community and themselves as developers that after Beyond Divinity's release in 2004, which left the studio in debt, that they chose to rise like a phoenix from the ashes, then take the path of reducing staff and cutting down on costs. Sven said at the time, to keep their 30-person team together, they started their two new projects, DOS 1 and Dragon Commander. DOS 1 was intended to be the side project, but quickly overtook them and became such a large focus for the team because they really wanted to work on that large-scale RPG. They sacrificed everything to create these games, being in debt, missing payments, and coming in way over budget. It almost sounds insane, but it's clear that they were not going to sacrifice the consumer experience to release another half-baked project. On DOS 1's release, it became their fastest selling game. Let me just say, if you haven't played DOS 1, that is Divinity Original Sin, it holds up and it is worth a buy even today. And we pick up where I began this video. This was my introduction to Larian Studios, the beginning of the behemoth we see today, casually strolling through the industry as one of the big players, and they did it all while pleasing their fans, which you just don't see today. On this game's release, they must have got the feeling that they'd been looking for the Divinity series. Finally, a game they could work on without pressure from a third party, other than maybe the tax collector. In a 2014 interview on release, Sven put part of the game's success down to their funding and development model, that being crowdsourced. He states, and I quote, "The feedback we received from them was worth its weight in gold." Another quote, "It's almost a co-development between us and them, because they pointed out things we were doing wrong and encouraged us to expand on the areas we were doing it right. As a result, we get a group intelligence applied to a game. It's always much better than a single person." What strikes me about this statement and Sven's general attitude in the development breakdowns and interviews I've seen is his humility. He doesn't get up on the stage and tout an expertise and amazement at his skill or his team's skills, which definitely need to be celebrated. He speaks openly about the process, the challenges and the feedback. Larian and his studio never appear to shy away from feedback, positive or negative. They take it and they learn from it. They don't become defensive. They don't lash back out when something doesn't quite sit right. Something that can't be said for most developers in the modern gaming space. As someone who played during the early access period for DOS 1, I remember all the communication with fans, the back and forth, what was happening, what was being implemented, and I was left eagerly awaiting new updates and convincing a friend to join me in early access. Now that we've got some background, let's fast forward some and speed up. On the success of DOS 1, and after paying back their debts and bringing in some profit, they crowdfunded DOS 2. And within 12 hours of putting that up on Kickstarter, they hit their goal of $500,000. And then some, reaching over $2 million and smashing all of their stretch goals before they could even announce them. As you're expecting right now, the game killed it on release in 2017. After being early access for 1 year, it was DOS 2 that allowed me to then get another one of my friends on board, and this has been the true success of these games. Their ability to bring in a player base on word of mouth alone. For DOS 1, there was actually very little advertising done, says Sven. They had no funds left. They obviously wanted their game in the hands of fans, but after pouring everything in, their last pennies went to a few ads. But word of mouth is what really carried them to their goals, and you only achieve that through achieving fantastic products. And that brings us to now, Baldur's Gate 3. An interesting note is that on the release of DOS 1, and in one of the articles I've referenced, Sven mentioned trying to get interest from the IP holders to work on an RPG, but is coy and didn't announce what that game was. Wizards of the Coast did later acknowledge that Larian had reached out after DOS 1, but they felt the studio was too new. On the release of DOS 2, however, I think we can all agree and clearly understand why Wizards of the Coast did see that Larian had truly earned their reputation. They'd cast off the shackles of the publisher model, had successfully released 2 critically acclaimed RPGs, and were beginning to define the genre. And define it they did. Baldur's Gate 3, a game that has actually redefined the genre, breathing new life into CRPGs and terrifying the weak. Now, in their move from DOS 1 to DOS 2, the studio tripled in size, from 40 to 130 people. For context, Larian currently has around 450 developers following Baldur's Gate 3. Now, BG3 has been one of the biggest game releases for me in recent memory, partially because of my faith in this studio and my love of RPGs and the fantasy setting. But what has stood out for me most has been the absolute bollocking it's given the industry, and their response has been as childish as anticipated. All the while, Larian Studios have been calmly enjoying their success because they've freed themselves from what other developers are seeing as an impossible feat. I mean, releasing games in a complete state? These people are fucking nuts. Where are the missing features? I mean, where's the skin? Where's the skin shop? You know, I mean, at least they have a battle pass. What? There's no battle pass. Oh, the game's a single price, and that's it. Let someone get the torches and pitchforks, right? Because it has to be witchcraft, surely. Because how can a game survive in this era without any of this? Now, on a final note, before I dive into my rant on the state of the industry, I would like to take a moment again to express my deepest gratitude, my absolute congratulations, and thanks to this studio for their insane success, for their true commitment to their player base, and for not selling their souls to Raphael when all hope was lost. Baldur's Gate 3 is the greatest of success stories for this studio and for Swen. Thank you all for your efforts. If that collector's edition ever becomes available again, there will be one on my wall. It is my deepest regret I did not snatch one up. Silly me thinking there would be plenty of time for that. Baldur's Gate 3 is a masterclass in storytelling, gameplay, world building, and has brought me already over 250 hours of joy, and I'm only partway into Act 2. That's been over multiple playthroughs in early access, and the 3 current playthroughs I've got running on my own and with friends. If you haven't already picked this game up, it's amazing solo, it's amazing with friends, and you honestly cannot go wrong with it. I often speak on my channel about games that are sometimes only really good with friends. This one is good across the board. Now, for the rest of you developers, first up, let me say this now. If you're a small dev, this rant isn't for you. Recently, we've heard BG3 is an anomaly, right? I hope you've all heard this, but essentially, a number of smaller developers and larger ones have made statements that this should not be seen as a new baseline for other RPGs in the future. RPGs should not be held to the same standard, they say. And I agree. If, big fucking if, you're a small developer, if you have a team of 10, a team of 30, a team of 50, no, I don't expect BG3 from you. Give me something 1/100th of the size, and if you have a good story, fun mechanics, and a hook, I will jump in. But you large developers, you large publishers need to get a grip. Now, let me give you an example. Bungie recently started memeing, not really seeing the irony in it, making the statement that over-delivery creates a pattern of expectation to the consumer. Now, this isn't a direct quote, but what they've essentially claimed is that when you over-deliver, the consumer's expectations is that you will then maintain this into the future. Now, maybe somewhere in that twisted view, we can make some sense of this, because it's somewhat accurate. And I think it would be a disservice to not acknowledge that. If I upload 3 videos this week, there might be an expectation I may do the same again ongoing. Or if Bungie were to upload a new raid each month for 3 months, then players might expect their monthly drop. But let's also consider that many game companies, whether it's developers themselves or the executive branch making decisions above them, treat the player like absolute garbage and then get upset when they get a poor response. Blizzard's, you guys have phones, right? Moment is a key example of this. I don't know why I said that. I'm just going to let it play.
I was curious.
Fluffy.
I was curious. I see a lot of mechanics that we've kind of been begging for in Diablo 3 in this. Is there any plans to make this playable on PC, or is this strictly mobile forever?
Are there any? The current plan is to be on mobile, both Android and iOS. We don't have any plans at the moment to do PC. Do you guys not have phones?
Yeah, you guys all have
Everyone's got a
phones,
phone.
right?
You can play on your tablet too.
They set up expectations for great games, deep stories, worlds, and excellent gameplay. Then they were picked up by Activision, and suddenly their games became microtransaction dependent and predatory. If you've never seen Josh Strife Hayes' The Immoral design of Diablo Immortal, then I highly suggest watching it. It's also worth taking a look at how developers communicate with their player and fan base. Larian Studios again give us a masterclass in how this is done. They've taken a transparent approach because they have nothing to fear from being seen. They show the players exactly what's in development, provided regular updates and gave feedback on what was working and what wasn't, and accepted it with humility and respected the feedback from players on what didn't work for them. They were respecting your time, respecting your experience, because that is what the studio values in you. Funny how that works, hey? They value your time, your experience, and you know what, dear viewer, and possibly future sub, they value you. Western studios in particular have developed an attitude of squeezing the player of all possible revenue at every opportunity and building their games to milk the whales. I apologize for how that sounds, but you have to understand, free-to-pay models work not because every player finds enjoyment in the game and then buys an equal amount of cosmetics to the value of their enjoyment, but because a small selection of players, these whales, spend copious amounts of money, and if they can incentivize these whales to continue purchasing in their game, then they're set to make large profits. You know, one whale spending 10k over 12 months is worth 10 players getting the game for free. That's why so many games use predatory practices such as daily login bonuses to keep you coming back, or they use things like dark patterns where they position certain buttons in certain places that make, oops, you've accidentally clicked on this and purchased something. So easy. But I digress. The real point of this video is that Larian Studios could have explored this model. Like another recent RPG who sells cosmetics, a battle pass, and charge full price for the game at large, Larian Studios decided instead to value your experience over what's in your wallet, which I know it's a crazy idea, but stick with me. They could have released the game, taken half the origin characters and released them as DLC. I mean, they weren't in early access, so would have been right there, would have been easy to do. They could have done that in a month's time, said, you know, they were still working on it. They could have implemented a skin system limiting the looks of your character, but they chose instead to provide you a full feature-rich environment. Not to take an easy shot at a recent release with Diablo 4, but one of the first things I saw day one was that the Diablo shop had cosmetics in it. My first thought was, oh, so part of what I just paid full price for was the development time that's gone into these cosmetics that are like a third of the price of the game. And yeah, while they're optional, and I chose not to purchase them, I couldn't help but feel I'd been duped. Paying full price for a game that minute one of day one is then asking me to pay more money for features that I would normally see available out of the box. When did that become the norm? I look to my left, I see Larian Studios slaving away over a hot PC, bug fixing and fine tuning and experience for me. And then I look to my right and I see Blizzard defecating in my cat's litter box and leaving a note for me saying it'll be playable in 2 to 6 months. Assuming the existing player base doesn't get bored, because if they get bored in that time, they'll blame me for not enjoying the game and move on. It's no wonder gamers are fed up. Larian Studios have spent the last decade demonstrating reliability. And most importantly, trust. This is a company that over the past few years released 3 of my all-time favorite games. DOS 1, DOS 2, and now Baldur's Gate 3. When I first stumbled across DOS 1, like I said, it was in early access. I'd never heard of the studio, but the game looked interesting. I know I'm a pretty diverse gamer. I'll play almost anything if the concept looks decent. When I played DOS 1, I immediately felt it was going to be great on release, and I convinced a friend to jump in, but I've already covered that. On the release of DOS 2, I had faith in the company, I had trust, I had a good understanding of their vision, and again, my friend and I jumped in immediately with zero hesitation. We even brought a third friend into the mix, and an announcement of Baldur's Gate 3, none of us hesitated. We'd seen a history of their games releasing feature complete and in good working order, and we felt valued as players. We knew that buying BG3 wasn't going to be like buying into a buggy Bethesda RPG or buying a DICE shooter that fails to have a scoreboard and is still broken while missing those features. We knew even in early access that BG3 was going to be stable and all around worth the price tag. I put in over 100 hours to Baldur's Gate 3 in early access. That's more time than I put into Diablo, and I'm already done with that game. Activision Blizzard, and I swear this video didn't start out as a hit piece on them, but they're a great contrast at the moment. They took a game like Overwatch 2, made promises on top of promises to the community, spoke about releasing brand new modes that are just around the corner, new content every season, and a great host of quality of life features for players. And day one, when I download it, what do I find? A shop full of cosmetics, priced illegally by Australian standards. We have a process in which if you put fake discounts on something, that is illegal. And even with those discounts, they were at ridiculous cost. Skins they'd been selling for years, most of which cost about a quarter to a half the cost of a AAA title. And mere months later, Blizzard canned all the promised content for Overwatch 2, leaving the community asking, What happened to the statements? You told me it was all right there, waiting to be finalized. What happened to this brand new single-player hyped experience just around the corner? Why did you re-release a game, take money from those who arrived at your shop and had good faith to spend that money based on the lies you were peddling? But most importantly, where was the communication? Are you telling me after hyping this mode for months, advertising it to players, taking their hard-earned cash, that overnight it disappeared? Or did the cost analysis change? Did they realize players weren't as keen to purchase cosmetics at high prices and decide, let's just can that idea and focus on more profitable ventures? I think Diablo 4 was just around the corner, right? I wonder what they were doing there. Now, I should say, I have no problem with developers making money. I mean, that's kind of the point, right? If Larian didn't have success with DOS 1 and DOS 2, how could they have made Baldur's Gate 3? But the lack of respect for the consumer over the past decade has made me wary. So wary that a massive release like Starfield has me questioning whether I buy it on day one. That should be a no-brainer. That should be a no-brainer. I remember Skyrim coming out a couple of days earlier than it was supposed to. For whatever reason, people just started selling it a couple of days earlier because they got it. And I remember racing down. I didn't have my license at that point in time because I was just out of high school. I remember racing down to the shops. I think I fucking ran there from my house to buy that game. Bethesda games growing up were fantastical games to get lost in. They had their quirks, but they were so massive in scope, you forgave them. Then Fallout 76 happened. And like the others discussed here, the company gave into all kinds of fuckery. If you need a breakdown on that, the Internet Historian has a detailed and hilarious piece on it that you may have already seen. I hope you have, and if you haven't, I will link it and you need to watch it to give you an explanation of exactly what they were doing at the time. And this is the problem I'm talking about. It's communication. Whether it's Fallout 76, Battlefield's horrible release, Overwatch 2's problems, and Bungie blaming players for poor uptake on cosmetics and their over expectations. These companies expect that they can release something to you and that you'll put up with it. Thank them for it and be back next week for another beating. Baldur's Gate 3 respects your time. Larian Studios respects your time. They respect your wallet and provide you an experience without interrupting it to ask you to buy more or sign up for this or to create a feeling of FOMO by showing you flashy, limited time skins that are one-time purchasable and then gone forever. So you better do it now. All right, so why am I raising this? I thought this was a video about Larian Studios, right? Well, to really highlight this studio, I think it's important to contrast them against the industry as a whole and to shed light on how the industry is reacting to them. A number of developers come out saying not to expect this quality, not to see over-delivery as the new norm. So my question is, why are devs hating to see Baldur's Gate 3 succeed? Shouldn't we all be celebrating here? How has this game's release, which has been shown to be immense, incredible, everyone's loving this game, nobody is saying a bad thing about this game. So why are we saying, hey guys, this game's incredible, don't expect this again? Don't you dare think we're going to do this for you. Why are we seeing that? I can tell you why. Because seeing you embrace Baldur's Gate 3 hurts them. It hurts them inside. It makes them feel bad. It's something most developers and companies have given up on. They gave up on achieving that long ago. They gave up on trying to release the most feature-rich, polished experience because they became more focused on developing a formula that keeps your eyes on the game while their hand is in your pocket. Baldur's Gate 3 represents something they can't achieve while keeping their stakeholders happy. Going back to Bungie's meme statement about over-delivery, they have actually over-delivered. I'll admit it, they have. Those cheeky boys. They actually managed to do it. Bungie over-delivered. Oh, no. Sorry. I'm not talking about Destiny. No. They didn't over-deliver to you. Of course not. You're the consumer. They've over-delivered to their shareholders, their executives, the people that count your money, put it in their pockets. Bungie, Blizzard, Bethesda. Oh, this is a lame joke, but you know, the B team, I guess, have for the last 5 or more years shown their stakeholders that they can release increasingly worse and worse products to consumers, but keep profits stable or higher than before. And seeing Baldur's Gate 3 is kind of terrifying for them. Watching you embrace Baldur's Gate 3, pour your praise and time into a game that, well, isn't complete garbage and is feature complete, tells them that it will be harder for you to swallow the shit they're inevitably going to try and shove down your throat. If I am standing on the sidewalk selling you snake oil, I'm selling you one shoe and advertising that you can get the other for a small, fee every month. While Larian Studios sells 2 for much cheaper right next door, well, yeah, I'm going to be concerned. I think what pisses me off most, and what should piss you off, my dear viewer, is that none of these developers come to your defense when a game wastes your time. When a massive company with resources throws a bag of trash to your feet and tells you to have fun, no one comes out and condemns them for this behavior because they're beholden to the same people, the stakeholders. They're expecting that they'll be doing the same thing just next month with their new release. But when a game like Baldur's Gate 3 releases and sets a new, higher bar, they come out in droves, screaming from the rooftops that it isn't fair, that you shouldn't expect this from them, instead of supporting a new achievement in gaming. I'll leave it to you to imagine why it is these companies don't want you to expect more from your developers, why they may be scared of this becoming the norm in the industry. Now let's change gear a moment, because some of the criticism raised focused more on player expectations and asking people not to expect a small team to reach the pinnacle of Baldur's Gate 3. And I think this is where they've lost the point in what Baldur's Gate 3 teaches us, which I said earlier, but bears repeating. Now let me say this clearly for some of you in the back or on the short bus. I don't expect the quality of Baldur's Gate 3 to become the norm. I don't expect this from small indie studios, and I don't want this from a small studio. I said earlier I play games across genres. On my channel now are videos relating to shooters, including BattleBit and Escape from Tarkov, to games in their own right from smaller studios that have done incredibly well. I play RPGs, action-adventure games, and whatever the hell Lumencraft is. I don't want a massive, expansive, story-rich game from everyone. I don't need a rich RPG like this with all the flashy looks, the deep story arcs that split in 20 different directions and keep me guessing. If you're a small dev, tell me a short, concise, and interesting story. If your combat is basic, I won't care. My friends and I often laugh when we play Call of Duty or League of Legends or another game from a large company and run into a simple bug, and we joke, oh well, they're just indie developers. Because we should see and expect more from the big players. But if you're a 5-man team, I won't be expecting that scope. That's not the point of Baldur's Gate 3, and this isn't the talking point that should be discussed, because no one expects that from you. The talking point is that a decently sized studio of 450 people produced this gem after taking their lumps, after showing the world what they can achieve when given the space and time to do so, what they could do when they weren't beholden to timeframes set by executives with no clue what's happening. The problem with game studios today is that the people with the passion and the developers themselves in many cases become drowned out by the executive branch, by the marketers, by the people who are there to squeeze profit out of their product, and they look for the most efficient and easy way to do that. Larian CEO Sven confirmed in the fallout of all this that Microsoft had made them an offer to acquire the studio, and it is music to my ears that they declined. We've seen this time and time again with many developers I've named. Bungie and Blizzard were both studios I respected in my younger years. I loved these studios. They released quality products and had a great fan and player base and appeared to understand what we were looking for. They engaged with us. They understood what we were because they were us. They were developers, but they were gamers first. Then, mysteriously on acquisition or partnership with, he who must not be named, they lost their passion. And from what I've seen and experienced, they've become anti-consumer. Now, if you've made it this far, and I've been slinging knives at your favorite dev, or that one of these devs make your favorite game, consider me the messenger. While I sit here and preach you that you're treated badly, I'm 90% sure I'll buy Starfield. Hell, I bought Diablo 4 and I have videos on this channel in which I loved it. I did enjoy playing Diablo 4, but that doesn't mean the company isn't trying to screw you over. I do like the game. I just recognize its failings. I recognize where it is designed to hurt you simply because making you smaller makes some executives' profits larger. Just because you or I like a game doesn't mean that the companies have done well by you or I. And if you like those games, that's completely fine. Hell, I'm still playing some of them. I need to practice what I preach. Swen stated himself that his concern relating to acquisition is that in larger corporations, profit often becomes more important than gameplay or quality. BG3 demonstrates Larian's commitment to quality, their commitment to the player, and their commitment to excellence. This developer, more so than just this game, should be celebrated for their stance in an industry that's rapidly deteriorating for the average consumer. Now, I think I've ranted enough. I hope that this video has been somewhat helpful to you, informative, enjoyable. Go out there, enjoy your games, enjoy your lives. If you're deep in D4 right now, I salute you for having fun. But next time you see the flashy skin in the shop, think twice. Consider how buying that skin encourages bad behavior, because you've already bought that game. You've done your bit. Think about it. Is it really worth buying? Because it's unfortunately the behavior of consumers that continue to encourage the bad practices. Now, studios like Larian are shedding a great light on this by doing it in the best way, releasing an insane game that makes them all shudder, that makes them shake in their little booties. And now they're slinging hate in every direction because they don't know how to manage it. They want to put you down and put your expectations lower. Tell you, no, this is an anomaly. People cannot create these games. Well, guess fucking what? Larian Studios did. Thank you for watching. This is a bit of a different video for me. If you've made it all to the end, you are amazing. Thank you very much. Please consider liking, subscribing, leave me a comment below. If you like this kind of content, let me know and I'll release more of it. I love talking about games. I love talking about the game industry. I hope this has been somewhat helpful. And hey, if you disagree, let me know in the comments. I love to hear feedback from you guys. I love to hear criticism one way or another. Again, I try to take it on the chin. Hopefully I don't get super defensive like Bungie down there. Hey, but I'll see you later. Check out my streams if you can. I'd love to discuss this more there. See ya.